Hello, good morning and welcome. My name's Rory Anderson and I'll be your host for this SBC panel. First of all, I'd like to thank the whole team at SBC for all their help in putting this event together. Rasmus, Andy, Kelly, and not forgetting Ahmed. Now, we should have a very interesting discussion today. We're essentially asking the question, is the .com model with its one-size-fits-all sportsbook still valid, or have fragmented regulatory requirements and market needs led us to the point where localized solutions are required? We have a great panel today, and I'm expecting some varied perspectives. Stanislav Silin is the CEO of Altenar. Stanislav, if you could just introduce your company.
Thank you, Rory. So Altenar is a sportsbook services and software provider to licensed and regulated customers. It's been founded around 2014, preceded by a software-only company that I was one of the co-founders of. So now we see ourselves in this market that's offering a sportsbook solution in both the .com market and also in the regulated country-specific markets.
Great stuff. Warren Russell is the CEO and founder of W2 Global Data. Warren, would you mind to tell us a bit about the services that your company offers?
Of course, yeah. Hi, good morning, everybody. So, as Rory said, we're W2, and we're a platform provider of KYC, AML, and anti-fraud services on a global scale, working primarily in the fintech, financial services, and betting and gaming space. Okay, so now we have Marco Castaldo, who's the CEO of Italian market specialist Microgame. Marco, are you able to tell us a little bit about your journey?
Thanks, Rory, and hi, everyone. So Microgame is a full-service B2B provider for online operators and licensed betting shop operators. It's a company that's been around for over 21 years in this business. We have had international presence over the years, but we made a choice that makes us a bit different, I think, from some of the other companies here, which is to focus on trying to be the leader in a single regulated market, which is Italy. So I suspect we bring a different point of view to this panel.
Great stuff. And last but by no means least, we have Tsachi Maimon, who's the CEO of Aspire Global. You've been busy, so can you tell us a little bit about the recent acquisition of BTO Bet and Aspire's ambitions?
Thank you very much, Rory. So yes, Aspire Global is an iGaming supplier, and we provide products from iGaming platform to game studio, aggregation, and also now with the recent acquisition of BtoBet, also sports solution. And we aim to be there for any operator that want to operate in any place on the globe. Right now, Aspire Global can offer its services, whether it's sport or platform or games, in more than 40 regulated markets, which is something that is by far one of the leading suppliers in the industry. And we have high ambitions now with BtoBet working together with us.
Excellent. Okay, so let's kick off. Stanislav, Europe is and has been for some time now a collection of very separate regulated markets, each with their own regulatory requirements and licensing conditions. As regulators' restrictions become tighter, what can sportsbook suppliers do to provide a multi-jurisdictional product?
The opening argument was that is the .com model still valid, and to bring this back to the original idea. And there's no black or white, of course. And so as a technology provider, first and foremost, I think your idea and your goal is to have as unified or as streamlined, standardized technology as possible, but at the same time, the product is there in the various jurisdictions that still draws back to some traditions, to some regulatory requirements, to some cultural changes, so one cannot ignore the local. So it's a hybrid. And therefore, if one thing that the operators or B2B suppliers should do is to have flexible enough tech, but good knowledge of the specific market.
Okay, Warren, do you have any views on this one?
Yeah, I think Stanislav's absolutely right. You know, it is a hybrid approach now. It's very much about almost working with the subject matter experts or the in-country experts and taking much more of a platform and varied approach. You know, I think there is no one-size-fits-all. It's, you know, as consumers, as suppliers, as merchants, as operators, whatever it might be, I think everything we want now is driven by choice. You know, if you look at anything from your social media to your audio visual to your betting and gaming platforms, it's all driven by that choice. And unfortunately, that means that operators have to get familiar with working with multiple suppliers, multiple jurisdiction requirements, and that there are two ways of doing it. Either you become the expert yourself, or you work with local experts and come at it from an aggregator approach.
Excellent. And Marco, I'm guessing you're going to be pushing for a more localized solution.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, well, yes, of course, that's it's not all black and white, like Stanislav said. I think if the question is how do you provide a multi-jurisdictional product, I think the first point is you need to recognize that this trend of fragmentation of regulated markets changes the B2B business model. So you need to clearly separate those components which can be shared across jurisdictions from what has to be strictly local. And to do this, I think it's important to distinguish product from service. And it's key for the B2B supplier to really frame what kind of offer he's supplying to his customers. Because on the product side, obviously, you've got local specificities. For example, in Italy, multi-channel is a big deal. So if you don't have a multi-channel setup, it's difficult to be competitive in many segments of the market. And there are obviously local compliance complexities that require strong local support and service. So if you frame your offer not as providing a product or a feed, but as providing a service, as providing a turnkey service, I think you have a more compelling offer for a regulated market. To do that multi-jurisdiction means you have to have those local resources in all the jurisdictions if you want to be really competitive. That's my view.
Yeah. And Tsachi, what have you got to say on this issue?
I agree with Marco. I can say that what we see is that the operators, as you mentioned in the beginning, it's becoming much more difficult for them in the regulated jurisdictions. And they are looking for additional added value than the product itself. What we can see is that a lot of operators are asking for additional services to be on top of a product. So this is something that the supplier can take forward and give a hand with additional services, whether it's a call center, whether it's a QA assistance, whether it's additional things that will provide the operator to be localized and with a little bit less cost, because it's very costly. One more thing that I must say is that in a contradiction to the historical acquisitions, what Aspire Global did together with BtoBet is that we are available for operators with two different PAMs, with two different solutions from all over. So an operator, and you can see it in the last release that we did with Betfair that signed with us, they wanted to be fast to market, and they know that they cannot do a lot of things alone. So there is an advantage to have several products, even if it's the same concept, but several products to be able to provide the speed plus services. It's a must-have today. It's very heavy.
Yeah, it's small margins, the difference between successful and not making it in the market. Warren, how are regulators treating the supply chain?
I was thinking about this when I was walking the dog this morning, knowing that this question was coming along, and I think the regulators are starting to look at the supply chain more closely. So we've taken a very proactive approach at speaking to the regulators and engaging with them, because ultimately, we supply a product that is very much key to the compliance regime and the regulated processes that our customers operate. So it's really key that we have to have a positive relationship with the regulators, because I think historically the focus was always just on the operator or just on the financial services provider or whatever it might be. But I think in the world we live in now, the police, as you might call it, are looking across the entire food chain. There have been cases in point across financial service markets where different parts of the supply chain or different parts of the customer journey chain have found themselves in difficulty when regulations have been breached, because the responsibility doesn't necessarily sit with one particular part of the food chain. It's becoming, we're having to put our head above the parapet, whereas previously we could sit nice and behind our customers, and it was always their problem, but it's not anymore.
Right. And Marco, do you think suppliers now need to keep a closer watch on their operator customers to safeguard their licenses?
Well, the customer risk issue is very different from a regulated market to the .com world. So, for example, in Italy, we work only with licensed customers who have been vetted by the regulator, and in fact, I would say it works the other way around. So the operator relies on the suppliers, who, by the way, are not licensed in Italy. So the operator is responsible for compliance, and the operator is at risk if one of his suppliers doesn't meet the compliance requirements. It's not the other way around. I find it kind of funny, because we have a lot of suppliers who operate in the .com world, and they like to do compliance on their customers, and there isn't really much point in doing that here, because in a regulated market, because once again the focus is the operator. But of course, if you're operating across a whole set of different markets that range, in varying shades of gray, and you may have a license in a jurisdiction that you use to serve those markets, and your license may be put at risk because one of these customers in a gray market somewhere does something that they shouldn't do, then of course that's an issue you need to keep on top of. But I think that's the old .com world. I think it's in the new regulated world, it's really the other way around. It's the operators who need to keep an eye on their suppliers.
Yeah, and I guess this is a good example of there not being a harmonized approach to regulation. For example, in Italy, you're not required to have a license as a B2B operator, but in the UK you are. So I guess, Tsachi, do you have any views on this? Are you conscious of kind of not policing your operators, but keeping on an eye and making sure they're compliant?
I think that, it's nice to see that the trend that some suppliers have also their own operation, their own B2C. So they are also involved in a way in the compliance. I think it became more of a true partnership than a supplier-operator, because we are really tight with each other. Yeah. And I think it's beyond the supplier. We know that if we will not do everything that the operator needs, at the end it will come back to us, not only with this specific operator, but with the other potential clients. So I think it became a very strong partnership towards the market.
Yeah, because if they're approaching you for localized solutions, it's a partnership. You're working very, very closely together. Stanislav, do you have any views on this one?
Yeah, just to add on to in this situation that there is no harmonized approach, having B2B supply independently licensed does create a resemblance of some harmonized approach, even though it maybe happens only in a few jurisdictions. So from one point of view, it's prescriptive, it's bureaucratic, it makes additional licensing requirements for the operators, for the suppliers, but at the same time, it keeps certain standards. And once you pick up a number of licenses, you're getting into that standard, which helps you be compliant before you even know that, or with very little effort in future markets which open. Some markets copy each other, some markets do something completely different, but there are certain standards like security standards or some player protection mechanisms that resemble each other. So whereas one should not be the police, of course, of the operators, having a license to safeguard keeps that operator and that supplier in shape, and obviously allows them to enter new markets more easily.
Yeah, and Warren, in terms of your services, KYC services, etc., are you seeing a trend to more? Do you see there being a more harmonized approach to KYC requirements across Europe?
I wish. No, I think it's, to pick up on what the other panelists have said, it should actually be a proper partnership approach rather than a supplier and customer. I think, to all of us to some degree are licensed or regulated or have regimes that we have to comply with. So, I am at risk and my business is at risk if my operator customers abuse the data that we provide them for purposes. So maybe police is a strong word, but there absolutely has to be controls on both sides. The operator absolutely needs to be able to trust and rely on its supply chain, and the supplier needs to be able to trust and rely on its customer.
Let's say
with regards to with regards to the harmonisation, I think that that is the ultimate goal. I think that would be great if we could get harmony across any kind of regime, but we can't even get harmony on a regime as to how to deal with a global pandemic, and that's cross-country and even inter-country. You look at different, there just seems to be a natural aversion to harmonisation, and I'm not sure why that would be. And it would be really productive and positive for the industry if there was a global standard. Are we seeing moves towards it? Seeing elements of it being picked up by different countries, but obviously the regulators and the regimes, they want to have their USPs. They want to have the reason why you get regulated out of this jurisdiction over that jurisdiction. It's a long time as well since betting and that has been seen as a dirty hobby, and regulators and the operators themselves have done a lot of work to sort of clean up the view and the image of the industry, and I think there's still a way to go to get proper harmonisation across that, because we could all probably list the 2 or 3 regulations that are markets that are a little bit greyer than others, or regulators that are a little bit more lenient than others. So will you ever get true harmonisation? I suppose that's a very long way of me saying no, I don't think you will.
Does anyone else have some views that they'd like to share with regards to this issue of a trend or not towards harmonisation?
Well, in Europe, I definitely don't see it happening. I think all the forces are working against that. So I don't think it's something we're going to see in the next few years in terms of common standards or common rules. The systems have been set up so differently from country to country, and the governments, from what I can see, are very, very jealous of their prerogatives. EU law allows them to have those prerogatives, and I don't see any real political drive behind it.
Right, okay. Tsachi, what happens when a market transitions from unregulated or grey to regulated? What's the B2B opportunity here And what kind of focus does it require?
Depends on which company it spells, because some companies see this scenario and they see it as a threat, because now the margins are going to be a little bit lower and a lot of more limitations. And some companies see it as an opportunity. What we decided, Aspire Global, is to see it as an opportunity. And I think that for B2B suppliers, if they choose the long-term vision, it is an opportunity to enter not only with one product, but with several products, and to try and push their product to be more localized. So if, for example, and again, I'm going to BtoBet, for example, they decided that they offer not only a platform and sport, but also retail solution. So they know that they are available for any relevant market, which is more than half of the world, that can offer and needs a retail solution. So I think that it's an opportunity for suppliers that have more than one product to enter to the market. And if you will add to it also services, so you can see a great opportunity to offer the operators.
Yeah. And Stanislav, what do you think is required from a B2B supplier when a market moves from grey to regulated?
Well, then we need to qualify the situation a bit better. If that supplier is already serving a player in the unregulated market, which has now become regulated, there could be both a benefit and a problem with it, because this depends on the operator's appetite, as Tsachi explained, to enter the regulation. Hopefully, luckily, we've had the benefit of having such operators embrace the regulation, and that's definitely been an opportunity for both ourselves and the customers. Because yes, margins get tighter, more operational restrictions, but then you can do things like B2C activities like sponsorships and massive advertising, if of course the government doesn't agree with the regulation. But what should a supplier do in that sense? Well, as I previously mentioned, if you've picked up a few of the certification of the licenses before, chances are you're already prepared. I mean, there has to be a regulation that is going to be so different. Maybe that's actually the case in the US, most likely, but it has to be so different from others so that it becomes a massive roadblock. Well, there's no generalized answer to this, so one has to look at the regulation in particular.
Yeah, and you can't assume anything with regulators, right? I mean, that thing you said about sponsorship, the ability to freely advertise, I guess that's another discussion completely. Marco, what do you think the requirements are for operators or more B2B suppliers when the transition's made from unregulated to regulated?
Yeah, I have a very specific view on this, but to introduce it, I'd like to say that when a market goes from unregulated or greater regulated, typically you've got different types of players. You've got incumbents, first of all, and you've got two types of incumbents. You've got incumbents that may have been in the market as a gray market operator, and you have incumbents who are the local gaming industry. Typically, we're obviously talking about online regulating generally. Although, as Tsachi was saying, the multi-channel component's important. So those for a B2B provider entering, if you can set up a partnership with one of the local incumbents, and that's what we see happening in a lot of the new markets that are emerging around the world. In some cases, the regulation prescribes it, but I would say generally it's there where you have a chance of success, because you're talking about a player who has a brand, who has a presence in the gaming industry. And then you have new entrants. Now, typically new entrants, in my experience, don't really have much of a chance. So, I mean, if we look at the history of markets that have regulated in Europe, for example, it's been a slog for companies entering greenfield in these markets, especially where you have a strong presence of .com incumbents. The winners are typically the incumbents. So if, like Stanislav, you are already supplying one of the .com players who are switching over, obviously the requirement is you need to be able to follow the compliance rules. If you want to access one of the other incumbents, then I think the requirement really is that you are able to offer a complete service. And by complete service, I mean complete outsourcing, including the delivery platforms, the PAM, the shop sales platform, if you've got multi-channel, as well as the products and the verticals, because having a single partner is important and is a source of efficiency and greater and shorter time to market for the player. And then you need to have local resources and capabilities to help that player develop a strategy, because the problem is, an incumbent coming to online from a casino business or a bingo business or, AWPs or whatever, typically will lack the competence and the expertise. So it comes back to sort of what I was saying at the beginning about having the local presence and having the capability to outsource soup to nuts, everything, is something that will make you more competitive as markets deregulate, because you are able to provide an answer to your customer, who's probably not going to get very far if he tries to build his own tech stack and plug in, suppliers from, for all the different verticals. It's just going to take a hell of a long time, and he's likely not going to have the competence. So being able to outsource fully and a strong local presence is, I think, the winning element.
Yeah, because there are costs to regulation, and I guess for a new entrant, they don't have an existing revenue stream coming in from that territory, so it's harder to justify the additional costs that are required to be successful in a regulated market. Warren, compliance is very expensive, right?
No. Will that do? There's obviously different approaches to compliance, and you can do you can tick the box and do it cheap and cheerful, or you can do it properly. There's different opportunities in between. I think, for me, when a market transitions from unregulated to regulated, the first thing is I start getting customers, which is good. But I think that the main thing people need to look at, I think, is the user experience and dealing with how the player wants to interact. That's crucial, and you do to pick up on what Marco was saying. The in-country expertise who understand, what an Italian player is looking for compared to a British player, compared to an African player, compared to a, US player. That knowledge, that local knowledge, is really important, and you can't find that out from remotely. You have to work with partners, which is why we as a business take a massive view on the partnerships. It's all about partnerships for us.
But compliance costs are presumably going up for most people who are entering a regulated market. We're talking today about regulatory restrictions becoming tighter. Compliance teams are generally growing. Would you say that was the case? Absolutely.
We've spoken to quite a lot of operators who are looking to take advantage of technology. Historically, the easy way to deal with it was you grew your compliance team. You got another 5 AML compliance analysts, or another 5 onboarding analysts, or whatever it might be. But that becomes unscalable and unmanageable from a cost perspective. And technology is moving on all the time. Just prior to the session, myself and Stanislav were talking about, single sign-on and federated identity. And is that the way that compliance is going to go? But you've got the difficulties around that with reliance and who owns the verification and who owns the customer. So, yes, I think, are compliance costs going up? No. Is spend on compliance going up? Yes, because the requirement is becoming tighter, but the actual cost of what you're doing, is probably actually going the other way. You're just having to bring more facets into it. Okay, and Tsachi, is this something that you come across? I mean,
what should suppliers improve, adjust, or add to their offering in order to be, truly relevant in a regulated market?
To try and come up with as many automated tools that we can. It's push us as a supplier and a technological partner forward, and it means that we need to do much more in order for the operator to have less and less manual work. If he will have a lot of manual work, high compliance or AML cost, it means that he will push you for lowering the price, and then the pressure is coming to you as a supplier. So if we will not work and put it in our roadmap that we need to be smarter, faster, and automated. Also in sport, there are some sports companies with 200, 300, 400 traders. It's not anymore.
Yeah.
The advanced sports technologies have maybe 10, 20 traders, and everything is automated. So we need to think about that. And if you say automated for traders, 10 years ago, it was like a dream. But this is where we need to be, to automate as many tools as possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely a cost issue as well, right? I mean, in terms of traders, I think anyone would prefer to have 500 traders, but that's just not commercially viable. You have to look at automated solutions when entering so many various jurisdictions. Stanislav, what would you say were the key ingredients for you at Altenar in terms of being able to move towards that multi-jurisdictional approach?
Well, as I've touched upon that briefly, of course, is the flexible tech that allows you to easily adapt to those requirements. And being the software development company, I can say that the recipe to that is to have right mindset in the development teams and be able to start something quickly, be able to be agile in what you do. But at the same time, because we're also operating in multiple jurisdictions, to try and extract the trends of what's happening and possibly try and predict where the requirement is specifically written, but you can do a little bit more because you feel that's where the industry is going. This could be put into the software, this could be put into the processes, this could be foreseen. I mean, a good example is all the jurisdictional security requirements are more or less based on the same set of rules. Yeah. And if you know that those are the rules, you can get them. Whether you certify to that basic standard or not is a matter of cost, publicity, and perhaps more prescriptive process. But you can do it. You know that those are going to be asked from. Similarly, with the software features and what is going to be on demand. And once you've done 2, 3 different geographical regions, have those differences, you've already built your UX, which is adaptable. You've already counted the edge cases that are difficult to handle. So the next one that comes along, very high probability, it's not going to be taking you for a completely separate development stream from scratch.
Yeah.
But you've got
the
product technical foundation.
Yeah. So the product's built with that adaptability in mind.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Marco, you're clearly an Italian market specialist. Do you consider from time to time moving into other jurisdictions? Do you think a lot of the learnings that you've had over the 21 years are transferable?
Yeah, absolutely. But the point is that I think that a wise man once said, you have a strategy when you've decided not to do things. I think it's important to keep focus, and we will go for international opportunities when we believe we are able to replicate the model that makes us a success. And we strongly believe, and we're talking about regulation because we're not thinking about gray markets, and we're born as a regulated market specialist, and we intend to continue to do that. And I think the key here is to be able to offer a complete service, as I've said before. I think that's true both from the marketing perspective as well as from the legal and compliance perspective. I mean, if we think about the fact that operators are, really trying to work on generating player experiences, that need to transcend single verticals. So it's more and more about having the operator has to have a tool that allows him to manage his offer seamlessly. So it's not about, giving him sports or giving him, casino games, giving him something else. I mean, it has to be about making him competitive by giving him tools that allow him to generate a winning customer experience. And on the compliance side, I think that's the other thing. In a regulated market, our experience shows us you need to be able to give a strong compliance support. And there are at least 4 levels of that. I mean, there's technical compliance, obviously, which in certain markets is very complex, like in Italy, where everything is real-time communicated to the regulator. There's product compliance, which sometimes is very heavily administrative and requires a lot of work. So, for example, the sportsbook in Italy, you actually need people to fill in forms and generate paperwork for every new bet you issue to get it approved. And so you have to have people on the ground who know how to do that. And then there's general legal compliance. Operators in a single regulated market might not have the local staff with the experience, as Warren was saying. And so we do that for our customers. We provide them advice and services, to deal with general questions about their license, having the licenses ourselves and having 20 years of experience. And finally, there's what Tsachi was mentioning, which is the tools for the future. So providing tools that go beyond today's compliance, working on sustainable gambling, working on tools that address the political issues, problem gambling and so on. So if you have all of this package, you have a compelling story as a B2B provider, and it's either that or you are extremely specialized. I believe long-term, it's these 2 models that win. So if we can replicate that somewhere, we will do that.
And Tsachi, are you familiar with the challenges that Marco's just described? And if so, how do you deal with all that when working in multiple territories?
So this is exactly the model of Aspire. It's to enter those markets and to provide the products and the managed services. As a matter of fact, I'm going to the simple things, to the personnel. We invest a lot in the personnel, in the protocols, in the methods, because it's true that each regulation have its own focus, but it's the same concept. So you have compliance, legal rules in one country. You have different in other country, but it's the same concept. You have compliance protocols that you need to follow. So we invest a lot in the people that manage the business in order for them to be able to scale what they know from one market and to take it to other markets. So it's a combination of not only products, but also the people that take it to the different jurisdictions.
Yeah. And so, Stanislav, do you find that now your role isn't just providing a sportsbook or a casino, it's general advice around compliance and marketing in the territories which your operators are looking to target?
Well, it's actually been quite a successful pattern that when new operators came along and they've asked for that expertise, and we happen to have already picked it up with other operators, has been very welcome, and that's been quite the enabler for our customers to grow in that region. So definitely, if we have that expertise, we are able to provide it. Just circling back on this whole solution versus a highly specialized approach, there's still a number of companies out there who want to own some of their tech. And when they wanted to own some of their tech, I mean, Aspire Global, we're in exactly the same situation when they build a player management system, which is where you own the players. You still get your games outsourced to game studios, some of them, maybe all. You can do the same with Sportsbook. You can do that with compliance because you can focus on the players. So if one has to open a new operation in Italy, for example, but that's not your only operation, and you're also operating in Sweden, you're also operating in Mexico, for example, you might not have the appetite to take a full solution as completely as an island style of solution, separate from. So there is still the opportunity of having a supplier that follows you or precedes you, perhaps, to all the territories that you're expanding to, especially with the younger companies that are investing in their own tech.
Yeah, I mean, and what you say is true, but not everyone's Bet365 and has thousands of employees that they can target all these territories successfully.
You still have to choose which territories to target, but then they focus on the marketing tools and the player retention acquisition tools, and then they outsource the actual products, which have the bureaucracy in Italy for this, the sports events and or maybe the content management of the sport book for Sweden, where you have to take care of the certain markets and certain types of events and competitors to the supplier. Because otherwise the people have the operation.
Great stuff. Well, guys, we're running out of time now. So I'd like to thank you all for joining this panel. I think it's been a good discussion. If just to end, if each of you can give kind of just a couple of sentences in order to sort of conclude matters for today. If we can kick off with Warren.
I think that's an advantage because I get to say the things I want before somebody else does. I think the main things for me is you've got to look at a partnership approach. As Marco said, the businesses that we see struggling are the ones who who don't have the strategy of knowing what they're not going to do. They want to do everything from day one, and that's where the wheels start to fall off and things start to go wrong. So it's know what you want, don't try and take over the world tomorrow, and really partner with the subject matter experts. Don't think you can do everything. Find the best games provider, the best KYC provider, the best CRM provider, the best platform provider, and work that way. Choose what you want to do and find the best of breed of everything else.
And Tsachi?
I think that the discussion gave us the understanding that the different markets, jurisdictions are pushing us forward as suppliers and technologies. And we need to be alert to any change in the future to try and predict it and work hard today for the operator tomorrow. So this is how we see it.
Great stuff. And Stanislav?
Sorry, we're just getting off mute. So definitely the theme of the discussion, one of the themes for me was the partnership approach with customers. So a partner of the police with regards to regulation, yet one which allows the operator to go where they would like to go in terms of the requirements and compliance. And I'll have the right flexible tech to enable all of this to happen efficiently and with good quality product.
Great stuff. And I'll leave the final word to Marco.
What an honor. Well, I think I agree with everyone. I think the market is changing, means lots of B2B opportunities, but it means being alert, as Tsachi said, and thinking carefully about one's business model, which needs to adapt to new reality.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, guys. Once again, thanks to all the team at SBC. So have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.